The questions just seemed like I was taking a statistics exam. Very unprofessional. The interviewer didn't show up. Their interview process went on for 3 to 4 months. This is exactly what I was talking about. Welcome back to another video where this time we get to really analyze what is Google's interview process like. As a recruiter who's worked in the technology industry for the past 7 years, I can't tell you how many times we've lost candidates to job offers at Google, but then sometimes you wonder, and I really want to know why in this video, what is the experience actually like interviewing at Google? And so in this video, we're gonna go check out a couple real life reviews and ratings from previous employees, from current employees, from our friends at Glassdoor. But before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, click that bell. It would honestly really mean a lot. And also before we get started, please keep in mind to also always take things with a grain of salt, as you should always do online. So let's get started. So at Glassdoor on the interviews tab, we see that over 16,000 people shared their experience, which is pretty incredible data set. And you can see about 62% had a positive experience, 15 negative, 23% neutral, which is a pretty respectable breakdown. How did you actually get an interview? Let's see this breakdown. 45% applied online. So websites, job descriptions, job pages are still really important. 20% get employee referrals. I'm not surprised to see this because I know Google has a pretty robust referral word of mouth program. And look at this, look at this, look at this. 20% has applied through a recruiter. So we are still relevant. Now I need to get Google as a client to figure out how to do that. Everything else is campus recruiting, other staffing agency, and in person. So, interesting. So I thought recruiter also applied to staffing agency, but then they have staffing agency here. I thought 20% of the inbound came from staffing agency. I'm like, that's pretty amazing, but I guess it's only 2. But still, 2% of all the jobs they're hiring for, that's still pretty significant. I still need to figure out how to get on that vendor list. But difficulty, I've heard some horror stories about interviews at Google, and they're kind of ranking at 3.3 out of 5, which is pretty average, which gives me the feeling it's kind of pretty difficult. Number 1, software engineering interview. This person accepted an offer, congratulations. They actually applied through an employee referral and they interviewed it at Google. Direct on-site because I interviewed in the past and did well at that time. Here's the thing that you need to know is if you interviewed at Google before, assuming it ended neutral or professional, you can always have the opportunity to interview in the future. So a lot of people who are interviewing at Google or FANGs, they're like, but like I'm interviewing Google, so I want to see it through. And I don't, even though like this other smaller startup might be more exciting for me, I don't want to say no to Google. But then they don't know that sometimes you can stop Google, you can join a job at a smaller company, and then you can always go back to Google. And I think when you're young, when you're fresh out of college, or you only have several years of experience in, it's the best time for you to kind of get that smaller company startup out of the way, out of your system. The more progressed you are in your career, the more obligations and responsibilities that you have in your life, the harder it would be to kind of take more risks at smaller companies. So a lot of times people who interview at Google early in the career, they end up staying there forever. And that's not a bad thing. But I know a lot of people who've done that, they're kind of stuck there because they are stuck by either the compensation, they know they won't get paid nearly as well anywhere else, or for a number of other reasons. But what's interesting is that recently I've now seen people who get offers at Google actually don't go to Google. They want to kind of join smaller companies, go through that, maybe invest some equity, make some good money, and then go to Google to ride out into the sunset. So either way, there's no good or bad thing, but like, you know, people don't know that if you interview well at a company, you can always interview again, and that's the case for tech. So this person went straight to on-site because they've already interviewed before, and they sent their resume to interview from the time they sent resume to interview, 2 weeks. That's actually really long, but I'm sure like that's probably normal or really fast in Google. I'm talking about startup, smaller company timeline. From interview day to offer is another 2 weeks. Wow, that's really short, because I've heard like Google processes go sometimes for like 3 to 5 months. And so this person really fast, maybe because they interviewed before. The syllabus for interview is very clear and simple for an engineer, in case you're wondering. Dynamic programming, super recursion, probability, graphs, all basic data structures, problem-solving ability. They review old interview questions in Glassdoor to get a feel, practice coding. So this is, again, very technical for engineers. If you have a technical background, you're engineers, you probably understand this. But I think the big thing that you have to take away here is that it was a fast process for this person because they interviewed before. Next. Data science interview, did not get an offer, difficult interview. They applied through a recruiter. I'm not sure if that was an in-house or agency, but they interviewed at Google for the California office. This person wrote, I applied online, was contacted by a recruiter, so in-house. They did a technical phone screen, and the questions just seemed like I was taking a statistics exam. And this is really, really important for people interviewing at technical roles. There are a lot of preparations you need to do before interviewing. So I see this a lot in engineering, DevOps, data. A lot of people give themselves at least a month, couple months, even more to prepare for when they know they're going to start interviewing, because every interview for a technical role will have multiple technical components. And if you're not prepared, if you haven't studied, you won't do well. Product management interview. They did not get an offer, but positive experience. They applied through an employee referral. I interviewed at Google. One thing about employee referral, I think it is the best way for you to apply to any job. So think of your friends, think of any acquaintances that you have. If any of them work at a company, hit them up, because for them to intro you to the HR people team, it will do huge wonders. And I've heard stories where you just get leapfrog over people who just applied online, especially for people who say nothing but really good things. They vouch for you. They've already part of Google, so the people HR team know that person who's referring you has already kind of understands what Google looks for in an employee. So the fact that like they're now employing you, they're now referring you, it's just an extra level of validation and credibility to your background and to your application. So again, if you have any friends, make sure you hit them up. It's a very straightforward process. One recruiter call, followed by a phone interview, followed by a virtual on-site. Questions were all about product sense, analytical during phone interviews, had 2 product sense interviews, 2 analytical interviews, and 1 technical interview for on-site phase. And that's like 6 stages in total, which is pretty a lot. The entire experience was great, except for the second recruiter who took over my case study as my first recruiter transferred to another role. The second recruiter seemed very unprofessional or not take my case seriously. He even sent over the wrong time and assessment categories of the entire on-site interview. Fortunately, I had my referrer to double check and corrected that before the interview. Furthermore, he also sent a canned email to all candidates for the feedback on the onsite. The words in the emails include, to talk about the results and next steps, really misled me that I would hear good news. I don't want to blame him on the failure, but he didn't offer any help. Okay, big thing here. I've seen time and time again where candidates would interview at some amazingly well-known companies and they would just walk away because they had the worst experience ever. I think that from every single touch point, a company needs to do their best to make sure the candidate has a positive experience. How serious you take the recruiting and the interview process is a reflection on your internal culture and your values and how well people are trained when you join the company. And so like if you are someone new, you're a prospect, you go through the interview process and you don't have a good experience, that in itself can rub you off the wrong way where it just might make sense for you to not want to work there anymore. And as crazy as it is hearing this, if you're hearing this for the first time, like why would anyone want to walk away from Meta, Amazon, or Netflix or Google? Like this has happened and this happens, and I hear about it over and over and over again. So if you're an in-house recruiter, try to make sure that you and your team do whatever you can to just have really good effort and positive experience at every touch point. And if mistakes happen, and mistakes happen, it's natural. Just apologize, be transparent, and be genuine. That can only help you, because if someone has a really bad experience, chances are they're going to share it with their colleagues, their acquaintances, their friends and family, and that can snowball into just a negative word of mouth that you just don't want to have to deal with. And you know, for a company like Google who relies on just recruiting tons of talent, you want to make sure your experience and reputation is as positive as possible. Software engineer. I interviewed at Google, the phone screen to place you at a level, technical behavior follows. Lead code can help you prepare for the interview, so I guess that's like one of these educational preparation sites. It's a typical interview. You can even talk to a recruiter and then do an interview many months later after you prepare. This is also really, really cool. Like once you have an interview and once like, you know, they think you're a good fit to move forward and you still want to move forward, but you don't think you're ready enough, at least have the conversation, because this opportunity can happen. You could be, hey, I want to proceed, but because I don't feel ready enough, just give me some time to kind of prepare and study. And while that may not work for smaller companies because like they need to hire someone ASAP, for a company like Google that has just ridiculous amount of pipeline and a lot of inbound candidates, they're okay because they literally have unlimited open positions. And even if they fill that original position, chances are if you're good, they're gonna find a home for you. So you just wanna make sure that if you're applying to Google, Google, you just do the best job that you can so that you can ace that interview and get the job. And take your time. No need to rush an interview. And that's a luxury that you can have at a big company like Google. This person did not get an offer, nor did they have a positive experience. Here's the reason why. Interviewer didn't show up, HR wasn't helping. They had a total of 5 HRs and 3 of them seemed to have discrepancies in their procedure. Very unprofessional. And yes, this is exactly what it's talking about. I think for a company that's big, that's always growing, the same could also be said for their HR recruiting team that could be constantly scaling and can also go through growing pains of their own. And I think what could happen is, things can get lost in translation, things can fall between the cracks, processes are just constantly in flux, and there's a little bit of chaos. But because of that, candidates can now have a bad experience. And if they have a bad experience, what do? They write really bad reviews on sites like Glassdoor. So whatever happens, just make sure you can take the time to understand what the systems and what the exact stages are, be as clear cut, be as crystal clear, and be on the same page as you can with all the members of your internal recruiting team, so that when you start bringing people on board and taking them through the process, like everyone is at a place that they should be, and people know exactly what to do for candidates at every single stage, so that this does not happen. Last but not least, TPM manager. This person did not get an offer, neutral experience, average interview. Very generic and very, very drawn process. The interviewers do not have much idea about the job responsibilities and the teams. Interesting. So again, this is something that in the agency world, why we're always taught to reach out to the technical hiring managers, because a lot of times if you're hiring for a role, and this also applies to non-technical technical roles, the hiring manager who's hiring for their own team would have a much better idea of the scope, responsibilities, skills, and tools needed for that role than someone on HR and recruiter, unless they have a really good level of communication. So that's why it's equally as important for in-house recruiters to be in sync with hiring managers at their company, because if they're not, then if they're not aligned, if they're not in sync, the candidates might not be able to match up, the hiring manager might get frustrated, or the recruiter just will have no idea exactly kind of what they're recruiting for. And so in this case, again, maybe it's different now, or maybe it's reflective of different recruiting teams, but unfortunately here, the interviewer just did not have a lot of understanding of the job responsibilities, and that's unfortunate because they're not able to most likely answer more specific questions that the candidates may have. The interview process went on for 3 to 4 months. This is exactly what I was talking about. Like most of the interviews that I've heard at Google were 3 to 6 months. And then this whole video that I'm making right now, everyone's saying that they have 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months max interview processes. So finally we had one person that had 3 to 4 months with the recruiter being very optimistic, was surprised towards the end of it that they went for internal hire. Would have appreciated the respect of candidates' time as well. Yeah, so overall, biggest takeaway here is just care for the candidates. It's easy as a recruiter not to care about candidates, but then it's also important to remind yourself that a candidate's a human being with feelings, and getting a new job is stressful. They probably have to change a lot of things about their personal life, even make time in their busy schedule to even interview. So the least you can do is do whatever you can to make sure every candidate has a good experience. So the fact that the interviewer here did not know much about the job responsibilities, and even though they almost kind of misled a candidate saying everything was looking great and they hire someone else, that kind of rubbed me off the wrong way. That's a kind of a big no-no. I'm really surprised by the amount of people that continue to apply online to Google. I was also surprised to know that depending on, I guess, the college or different programs, that some of the interview process at Google can be really, really short. But it's also unfortunate that even a company like Google is not immune to growing pains, and this also applies to the recruiting HR people team, that they don't have the best relationships possibly with hiring managers, but most importantly because they may be growing so fast, or things are changing, or things are in flux all the time, that results in kind of a sub-average or poor candidate experience. And even as awesome Google is, even a company like Google is not completely immune to negative candidate experience. And I think this is a story to us all, that this is something that we should all take very seriously. And if you're watching this, if you're an internal recruiter, whatever company that you are, like, do whatever you can to make sure the candidate experience is as positive as possible. In this market is a candidate market. So companies have to try harder to sell themselves to attract talent. And while it's helpful to be able to throw top 1% compensation financial packages and have the biggest perks and benefits, sometimes the smallest detail, like the interview experience that can easily be overlooked, can be a make it or break it for a lot of people who are also talking to many other companies as well. So please keep that in mind, and this also goes to any other recruiter, especially on the agency side. Whatever candidates that we do work with, whichever clients that we are working with, consulting or advising, this should always be top of mind on a priority that we should all strive to make sure, so that the better candidates have experiences, the better they will accept the job, the better you'll be closer to your goal, and the better your company will continue to scale and do some amazing things. So if you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe, a big thumbs up. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this, or you have other companies that you want me to review and check out, comment down below. I will do my best to kind of get through them. Feel free to also follow me at Preston_Park, as I try my best to also post daily. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you on the next one.